Good evening and welcome to the candidates for the 5th Michigan State Senate District, presented and produced by the League of Women Voters of Northwest Wayne County. My name is Susan Rowe, and I am the treasurer of our local League of Women Voters and your moderator for this evening. Tonight, we welcome candidates running for Michigan's 5th Senatorial District, Dana Polhanke and Emily Bauman. Voters will have the opportunity to vote for one of the two candidates running for this position. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We do not support or oppose any candidate running for office. The League does take positions on issues after study, so you may see our name attached to an issue that we are advocating or opposing. The League of Women Voters is where hands-on work to safeguard democracy leads to civic improvement. Membership is open to anyone who is at least 16 years old, and you can join through our website. The League's main mission is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation in government. One of the ways we do this is by having forums such as this one tonight. The League is also preparing a nonpartisan voter guide, which can be found online at www.vote411.org. Holding a candidates forum by Zoom possesses challenges different from an in-person forum. Only League personnel and the candidates are present at these forums. We solicited questions from the public in advance so that we could ask them at tonight's forum. Questions were screened for clarity, and those which include personal attacks on a candidate were eliminated. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not the League of Women Voters. As qualified candidates were invited, all qualified candidates were invited and are here tonight. All the candidates have agreed to the format for tonight's forum, which is as follows. Each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute opening statement, a 2-minute response to all questions, and a 2-minute closing statement. The order that candidates speak was determined by a random selection process witnessed by the candidates before the recording of this forum began. We will rotate the order of the candidate who responds to a question first. League member Ann Abdu produced this forum tonight, and Val Nelson is our timer. She will be holding up cards so that the candidates know when their time is up. The candidate must stop when the stop sign appears. And now we will get started with our forum. Let us begin with our opening statement from Ms. Polhanke.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. This forum is a time-honored tradition, and I was happy to participate in it in 2018, and I'm happy to be here today, and thank you to the moderators. Just about me as a person. I live in Livonia, and I live with my husband, Jim, who has worked for Ford for over 20 years. I have 3 adult stepchildren, and I have 2 dogs and a horse. Before I was a state senator, I was a high school English teacher for almost 20 years, and I do have my master's degree in teaching. I was very honored to be named Teacher of the Year in my district twice. And, I never thought I was going to leave public education. That wasn't a plan for me. But in 2016, after the election and just seeing firsthand, over the decades, how insufficient funding has degraded the profession that I loved and really shortchanged students and parents, I decided to run for something. So against the odds, I flipped a seat in 2018, and now I serve as the, most notably, I guess, I'm on quite a few committees, but I'm the Democratic Vice Chair of the Education and Career Readiness Committee in the Michigan Senate. And I think as far back as we could research, I am the only K-12 former teacher to be on the committee. And I think it's important to have members on committees who can actually walk the talk and know firsthand about how decisions in Lansing can affect students and teachers and families.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Bauman.
Thank you to the League. Thank you for having me on this. As Emily Bauman. I'm actually ready to serve as state senator in Lansing. I'm married to Bill for 26 years, almost just next week, 26 years. And we have 3 children, 1 adult, 2 youngers. And as a daughter of a Michigan born and raised parents and 2 teachers, we spent every summer vacationing in Michigan. So you really learn to appreciate a state when you see it as vacation land. When I was born in upstate New York, while I was born in upstate New York, I spent nearly half my life living in Michigan. At one point, I lived in Lansing, and it was there that I got my first taste of thinking, someday I am going to run for elected office. After that, it was gaining as much real world experience and community experience as I could through college, working for a large telecommunications company, learning how to lead and facilitate diverse groups, and learning how to, I managed conversations between union workers as well as management, and that was very intense conversations. Being trained on understanding and teaching diversity to many of the departments, along with building our own landscape company, working in many different industries, raising a family, moving across the country, suffering personal, family, and business loss, leading teams and nonprofit organizations, navigating through all the highs and lows that life offers, including loss of pregnancies and taking care of my own mother in my home in her last months of this life and entering eternal life. Most recently, my work has allowed me to take a deeper understanding in what and why people think the way they do. This has allowed me to work with them to create lives and businesses that are thriving, their families and their employees. These experiences have prepared me to understand, relate, and care for others, no matter what their circumstances or where they come from. I have met with several people over this campaign, and I look forward to working for the liberty, the individual liberty that we all are looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our first question will go to Ms. Pohanke, and it is, why are you running for public office?
I touched on a little bit, what got me into running, and that was based on some deficits I saw in education after being a teacher for almost 2 decades. But it's more than that. I think that we need to help our seniors with prescription drugs and repealing the retirement tax. I think we need to give our workers protections and wages that allow them to live dignified lives. We do need to continue to fix the roads and the infrastructure, and including our water infrastructure. We need to protect our Great Lakes and our environment. We need to also repeal the 1931 law on the books that makes abortion a felony, so that women can continue to exercise their right to liberty and equality by having autonomy over their own bodies. So there's a variety of reasons why I'm running again. I still have more work to do.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Bowman, same question.
I'm running, well, as I mentioned, I've actually always known someday I was going to run for elected office. I looked at city councils. When I lived in Colorado, I spent a lot of time with a friend of mine who became mayor of Thornton, Colorado. And there were a lot of different things. And I started working with just being more aware of what's going on in my community, what's going on in my own city. And in 2020, I actually ran for state rep and to kind of get my feet wet and see where that went. And then when I decided to go for Senate, it was really because in researching some of the things, I understood that was actually a better fit for me. And I knew that I wanted to feel represented. There was a lot of feeling that some people I was talking to weren't feeling represented. And I just really want to make sure that happens, and that we are really working for individual liberty that we are afforded in our constitutions and our declaration.
Okay, thank you. Second question, we will start with Mrs. Bowman, and that is, how will your past experiences make you the best candidate, and what are your qualifications? Some of that's already been mentioned.
We both jumped and answered some of these. One of the things that having real world experiences, one of the things that growing up, when I think about serving in elected office, one of the things that I remember always believing was you had to live a life and then you ran for elected office. You didn't just jump in, and it was, because, you didn't jump in because you didn't learn there. You learned all about the different industries. You worked with people, you worked with different types of people, whether it be a team or whether it's your own family, because sometimes your own family is different people. And you just learn how to work with different people and be able to have those conversations, come to solutions, work together to come to solutions. One of the things that we talk about a lot in my industry is a mastermind, that how critical it is that this is, when you come together with a group, like a focus group or even a coalition, and you have those discussions about a situation or a problem. And then through that process, another mind comes into the room, and it's called a mastermind, because that's where the solutions, that's where the magic happens. And that's one of the things I want to help with and serve in that area. And by having all the industries that I have, whether it be, veterinarian, retail, the card and gift industry, I worked in all of these industries, and telecommunications, that was a big one. And just being able to bring that to the table to be able to actually talk about things that I have lived and understand.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Polanki.
The question was about our backgrounds and how that prepares us.
Yes, how will your past experiences make you the best candidate? And then how do you propose to address them, which in some instances has already been answered, but if you could expand on it a little.
Right. As I mentioned before, I was a public high school teacher for a very long time, and I was a teacher leader, and so I know a lot about the curriculum and the testing and from top to bottom that happens in that arena. I was also a small business owner for a time. When the film incentive came to Michigan, I used my background in casting. That's not fishing casting. It's actually putting people in movies and television. And I did that on a regional basis. And so, I did that on the side during summers mostly, and evenings when I wasn't teaching, but that gave me an idea of the trials and tribulations that go into running a small business. And just my past 3.5 years in the Michigan Senate have really taught me a lot about how state government works. And I think I've emerged as a go-to person for my colleagues on anything related to education policy or funding. And I've really been no shrinking violet when it comes to, speaking out on the Senate floor about things that I see that don't seem right to me, or things that need to be promoted. So, I'm anxious to continue this work for another 4 years. And I think I've done a pretty good job, and hopefully my constituents feel the same way.
Okay, thank you. Next question, we'll begin with Ms. Pohanke. What are the most important challenges facing our state, and how do you propose to address them?
Yeah, so, I don't want to keep harping on education, but it's kind of a big deal. We have teacher shortages in certain areas. We have inadequate funding. So any of the things that we'd like to see get done, universal preschool, hiring more social workers, reducing class sizes, getting mental health professionals in there, all revolve around funding. So I don't like to see when people denigrate, oh, more funding, you just need more funding. Well, yeah, we need more funding because, hiring, keeping teachers, at a wage that they should have as highly educated professionals, and increasing that, and all these programs that we want for our kids take money. So education's a big deal for me. And then I have 1 minute. I would also say, the economy. People are struggling right now, and I get it. And I've done what I can do at the state level to try to mitigate some of that. For example, I voted for a gas tax holiday twice in the Michigan Senate. Once I voted against members of my own party. I've worked on legislation to lower prescription drug prices. Again, I'm going to mention repealing the senior retirement tax, increasing the eligibility for the earned income tax credit. I was all in favor of Michigan Reconnect, which is giving tuition and training for older workers to get an associate's degree or a certificate at their community college. So these are just some of the things that I think are important and what I've done to address
Thank
them.
you. Thank you. Mrs. Baumann, the same question.
The three things our state are looking at. Well, one of the things I do know is that right now our education system is in the middle of the road right now. So yes, education of our young is critical, and we need to raise that bar because it's just been going in a downward trajectory and it's not acceptable. It's just mediocrity has never been acceptable to me. So we definitely need to be looking at education, and there's a lot of opportunities to work with that at the local school level and being sure that money gets to the local school level to make those decisions. Another area that I know, obviously food and gas and fuel, we need to be able to make sure that people can actually afford their food and fuel, which then it's a balancing act. So one, you need to make sure they have the skills to get the jobs they need, whether that's a degree or even a high school diploma or a more technical degree. And they have the ability to earn a good wage and earn with those skills, and then keeping the prices low so that they can actually put the food on the table. They can keep the prices low of fuel and actually afford their fuel to get to their jobs. So those are some of the big ones, those three areas: the jobs, skills, education, as well as the pricing in the economy. And some of that actually might be cutting back, looking at the wasteful spending. There's areas where we need to be putting more money in. And then there's areas where we do need to pull back and look at that wasteful spending that's going on.
Okay, thank you. The next question, we will start with Mrs. Baumann, and it is: Michigan, like the world, is recovering from a pandemic. What would you do to make Michigan better prepared to face a future health crisis? Mrs. Baumann.
Thank you. One of the things that we need to do is there is an education with people. I think one of the things that's really important is that we maintain some medical freedoms, that people actually have the ability and the tools and the resources to be able to take care of their health. I would like to very much see that people have an increase in physical health, whether there's a program that they are helping their physical health, or maybe it's mental health programs, that we're really getting down and diving down, that people have the skills to cope with all the stresses of life. We have healthier people, we are going to be able to be at a better position to be able to handle almost any health crisis. So we really need to be focusing on that, because that is something that even the school system, my husband's a teacher at an at-risk school, and he's actually a phys ed teacher, but high school phys ed teacher, but there's no phys ed requirements in the junior and senior years. And we need to be looking at that and saying, are we really addressing the physical and mental health of people so that their bodies are able to actually recover from illnesses and things like that? And whether or not it's basically making sure that drugs are available that actually treat the medicine, those kind of things. There's a lot of those areas that we can be working on.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pohanke, same question.
Right. So as someone who was in office during this unprecedented global pandemic, I saw kind of behind the scenes how we were building the plane as we were flying it. And certainly in hindsight, you can take a look and at first I was wearing gloves everywhere because we thought the transmission was related to, touching. And so hindsight is definitely 2020. And I wish we knew now what we didn't know then. But I agree with with Ms. Baumann that, we need to get rid of the stigma around mental health, because I think, many people suffered with isolation and, kids in school not being among their peers. So definitely, I think it exposed a need for greater mental health funding in Michigan and programs. I think that we need to stick with science. You know, it was a little troubling during the pandemic. Lots of really unscientific theories and treatments were being bandied about that weren't rooted in science. So I definitely appreciate all our medical professionals who withstood some of that. So I think that's my answer.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, we'll begin with Ms. Bohanky. What kinds of policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our state?
Social and racial justice, yeah. So the thing that comes to my mind immediately is Black maternal health. In Michigan, pregnancy-related death is almost 3 times higher for Black women than white women in our state. And I know Governor Whitmer has taken steps to address it, but we absolutely need to do more. We need to hold prescription drug companies, drug makers accountable for their pricing. And I'm in favor of a prescription drug pricing board. We need equitable funding in our schools. So, you know, you would steer more funding to students or schools or districts that need it. So it's funding according to need. And definitely enabling people to have good paying jobs. I'm really pleased with the Reconnect Michigan Reconnect program I mentioned before. And again, I'm gonna keep hounding on repealing that senior retirement tax that's unfair to our seniors.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Bowman.
Can you
Same
repeat the question just so I make sure I got all the pieces?
Yeah, certainly. What kinds of policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our state?
Okay. Yeah. One of the things that I think we all know is true is that every single person on this planet is amazing and wonderfully made. And not one of us is alike any of the other ones. So we're all unique and we're very different. And I think there's a lot to be said that there with that individual liberty we talk about that. So with that being said, one of the areas that I look at is making sure that there is, whether it be funding or ability for people to actually work, you know, the skills for people to work, whether, and look at different areas for that. And that is one of the things I know the trades is a huge area that is just missing. I've had some people say they cannot find an electrician, they cannot find a plumber. And I'm like, okay, we need to get more people into that and working in those industries, regardless of anything. We need to have no issues with that. I also want to make sure that that in certain areas, we need to keep government needs to get out of the way of some other areas. Some of these, there's a lot of people that are trying to build businesses, but then they have all these little regulations and all these things that they are not being able to do. So even like garage sale tax, I've heard some cities are doing that, and then of course obviously yes, the pensions, and obviously reducing tax on gas so we can actually get places. I know we all probably have seen where the gas price is different in different areas. Well, there needs to be a little more consistency there. We can't, if that's the tax, we need to do something about that.
Okay, thank you. The next question sort of can tie into what you've talked about. How will you work to increase job opportunities for your constituents and all Michigan residents? And we start with Mrs. Bowman.
Job opportunities?
Yes, for your constituents.
Yeah.
So you could follow up on what you were stating first.
I had an opportunity to sit in front of a panel of business leaders a few weeks back. And one of the things that's interesting is that they have all have job openings. There's a lot of jobs openings that are right there. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And I know I can probably come up with a million reasons why I think that there's people that are not going back to work. Before the pandemic, we had a low unemployment. We had some really things going, some good things thriving. And then all of a sudden now we have all these opportunities to work. and they're struggling finding workers. And listening to these business owners, they are raising wages within their own organizations. They don't need government to tell them to raise wages. They can do that themselves. They're raising wages. They're giving opportunities for people, and they're still not getting the people coming back. Some of them I know are still collecting unemployment. So I don't know where that's going. We need to make sure that we are providing those resources, so that we need to make sure that we are maybe it's attaching jobs and giving people opportunities. And then of course, making sure that they have a reason to work. If that means that we need to look at the different systems, that is one of the big things, and making sure that, people do know that there's jobs and they can do that. And if it is skill sets, then we need to make sure we have the education opportunities for them to do that as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pohanky, the same question.
I come from a family, 3 generations of union membership, both in the UAW and the MEA. My dad was a high school teacher. My husband, my stepson, my father-in-law, all former and current UAW members. So I would like to see right to work repealed, because it hinders union membership. And I think Michiganders deserve worker protections and decent, a livable wage to, again, live the lives that they want to live for their families. Another thing I have done is voted in favor of creating thousands of jobs with chip manufacturing. And my husband builds the Ford Lightning, which is Ford's electric vehicle. So I'm definitely behind supporting electric vehicle production in Michigan. And I would like to tee up Michigan to be the world leader in autonomous vehicles. If not Michigan, then who? So I'd like to see that budding industry take root here, and then that's going to create lots and lots of jobs.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Pohanky, the next question. In building a vibrant Michigan economy, what steps or programs would you emphasize to move this forward? Such as income inequality, addressing that, or emphasizing reforming tax policies, some of the various programs that you see as.
Could you repeat the first part of the question?
Yep. In building a vibrant Michigan economy, what would you suggest as steps or programs to move that forward? To move income inequality, work on that, or tax policies?
Well, I again agree with my opponent. I hate saying opponent, with Ms. Bauman, about the skilled trades and promoting them even more in our schools. When I was a teacher and I taught mostly 12th grade students, I'm telling these kids, just be really good at one thing that people have to pay for. And that's your plumbers, your electricians, your pipe fitters and your carpenters. So I've been able to tour a lot of these skilled trade facilities, and wow, it's just mind blowing. These young people, or whoever goes into it, can earn while they learn. So they're, going to school and earning a decent wage at the same time. And then once they get out, they have a skill that they can take with them anywhere. Hopefully they stay right here in Michigan. So yeah, definitely I'm a huge proponent of the skilled trades. Yeah, I think I concluded. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Mrs. Bauman.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to start somewhere and I lost where I was going to start, but that's okay. So obviously, yes, creating jobs. And one of the things that, again, I mentioned on this is that making sure that we keep government out of the way from helping people grow jobs. I know where I was going. I've always been a big proponent of the small and medium-sized businesses and how that is such a critical part of our economic infrastructure. We need to get those businesses back up and running. It's disheartening to see how many businesses close. There's already a statistic that businesses close within their first 5 years. And then to have businesses that have been around for many, many, many years close after what happened in the last 2 years. So helping these people get their businesses back up going, whatever that takes, I don't know if there's breaks on those first 5 years, something that people can get those businesses up and they can actually get to the point where they're hiring people and being able to support more of the economy, giving people jobs. Another area that I'm actually willing to champion is establishing a licensed reciprocity between states. Virginia and Georgia have full reciprocity with other states for industries such as real estate and electricians. And I've seen that where, I know teachers are one too, is that there are concerns that people can't move from state to state. And what a great way to draw people into Michigan, to bring people to Michigan, to build their businesses and to come to us because we have reciprocity with these licensing. That would be a huge economic boon for Michigan.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question we'll start with Mrs. Bowman. Do you support any additional firearm reforms for Michigan residents? And if so, what are they?
I'd like to see, there are a number of laws that I know are on the books that I have not seen enforced. And I would like to see some of these laws that are actually already on the books enforced before we just keep making more and more laws. That is something that we need to look at. And I know that some of this touches, and I'll just touch on a little bit, touches on the schools. We have a lot of concerns with schools and what's happened in them across the country. And it is so sad because those are our children. That's our future. Those are our next generation. Those are our leaders. Those are our next elected officials. And one of the things I've heard as far as a really good solutions that people are coming up with is the idea of let the school districts and the parents in that local school district make the decisions on how to protect their school and their students. They know their students, they know their community, they know it best, and giving them opportunities. I've even had some meetings with veterans and things like that and worked with some veteran organizations that have said, we want to help. We can provide free or low cost opportunities to help so that we can actually keep these children safe. Because we need to start there.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pohanky, same question.
I really appreciate this question. There is an undisputed runaway gun violence problem in our country. And I am a member of the Gun Violence Prevention Caucus in the Michigan legislature. I was at the Capitol on April 30th of 2020 when it was, I guess you could say, armed men, lots of armed people came into the Capitol, and it's pretty disturbing. And I was a leading voice and instrumental in getting open carry removed from the state capitol. There are thousands of kids, that come through there each year, and it doesn't make sense that you can't bring signs into the Michigan Capitol, but you can bring guns, wheeled guns. So I do support common sense gun legislation, and for me that is red flag laws, safe storage laws, universal background check laws, magazine capacity laws. I don't think we've done enough as a state to keep our residents safe from really this epidemic of gun violence. We can do a lot more.
Okay, thank you. The next question, and that one will go with Ms. Pohanky. What measures would you support to reduce the effects of climate change on public health in Michigan?
Well, let me think about this. I'm going to support any bills, and I have supported bills that increase energy efficiency, renewable energy, moving to an electric vehicle society, you know, slowly. They're very expensive still right now and out of reach for many people. On that front, I've introduced legislation, you know, to provide a rebate for electrical car chargers. In terms of air pollution, there was a landfill in my district that had tons of violations, and there were noxious odors just emanating all across my district. So with the Attorney General and a state representative and Eagle, we got that taken care of, and you know, took care of a corporate polluter in our own backyard. And so they've upped their game and are now legally obligated to abide by the laws, by the environmental laws. I also introduced legislation to triple the fines for landfill violators, like the ones who were in charge of the landfill near my district. So there are a lot of different things we can do.
Thank you. And Mrs. Bowman, the same question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of goes along with some of the other things, is that when we have laws on the books about environmental protections for where businesses are actually doing things that they shouldn't, we need to make sure that we are enforcing that. If someone is breaking a law or is having a spill, they need to take care of it, and they need to take care of it bigger. They need to do some things to help the community that they're in, whatever it is, whether it means that they need to increase some funding for people's medical bills and things like that. We do need to hold people accountable. That, you know, part of individual liberty is also being sure that people are accountable and responsible for their actions. So that's something that is a key part of being able to do that. We don't necessarily, you know, need to have new things. We just really need to make sure we're enforcing things and not letting people off the hook when they are doing things like that. And I will talk on health again, because, you know, encouraging people to be healthy. And, you know, we have tons of toxins in our body because of our environment, but there are ways to remove those toxins out of our body. So I really encourage an increased education in people's health so that they know what they can do to be protecting themselves. And I know that some of these toxins can affect the mental health too. So we've got to be making sure that we're looking, you know, I always say you got to come at it from a reactive and a proactive way. So, and that's the best balance of all of this, because if it's affecting our health, we need to make sure we are proactively preventing that opportunity with great healthcare, including, like I said, preventative and things like that, and the mental health side.
Okay, thank you. The next question has to do with education and providing an equitable and a quality public education. And during the pandemic, when they were all going to in-home schooling, where they had to use laptops and the internet, the digital divide was so apparent in the northern, you know, like the Upper Peninsula and the northern part of the Lower Peninsula, and some of the rural areas just, you know, in the middle of the state. How do you feel that should be assisted? I mean, I know there is federal dollars that have come through, and what policies or legislation do you feel should be done for the state to assist these local school districts in providing the digital equipment that is necessary, fiber optics and such? And this is with, Ms. I'm sorry.
Me first?
Yes, you first.
Okay. I'm probably gonna take a little bit of a different turn on this. My kids actually go to a low technology school. I'm a big proponent of not having a lot of digital when it comes to children learning. I think there are times and places where it's appropriate, but I'm a pen and paper girl. And I think that these classical education opportunities for kids where they are really learning how to write, how to read through paper. And I mean, even writing skills, where was I? I was just at some place and they were like, I was talking to these kids, these teenagers, and they can't even write in cursive. because they're doing all this digital stuff. And that's a lot. I mean, it can't become a lost art. It has to be a critical piece that people are able to learn how to write and they're able to spell correctly and all these things. And that's something that seems to be missing. And I'm not blaming it on the digital. I mean, like I said, there's some areas where it is, but I really think we need to be looking at the opportunities to be more pen and paper. I will admit that I've also heard that some of the top technology people in our country actually send their kids to school where there's no computers, there's no digital access to that. And so I'm kind of like, okay, if that's the case, then we need to be looking at that. And so I actually do support a low tech when it comes to education. And that being said, we do need to do things to help people have access to the internet, because that is something that we're not going back on. I get that. We need to make sure we have people have access to the internet, and that's looking at infrastructures there. And that's going to be one of those questions that I know that the technology committees and talking to different industries and finding out what makes sense to be able to provide that opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pohanky, same question.
Yeah, I think that in order to prepare our kids for 21st century jobs, we have to prepare them for a digital world. I too somewhat lament the loss of handwriting, but that's okay. You know, the greater good, I think, is preparing our kids for, like I said, a digital world now and moving forward. So, you know, we've all been up north and experienced we have our great computers and our phones, and you know, kids are given like laptops, you know, in schools, but none of that makes any difference if you can't connect. So I think the digital divide is a big problem, and I have sponsored legislation that would mitigate that and get the resources where they need to go to get our kids up and online. I did teach digitally way before COVID, and you know, it's a great tool if you know how to do it. It's a big Google Classroom fan. It increases accessibility, that kids can, you know, access their assignments from wherever they're at. So yeah, I think it's a mistake to want to move backward. So we need to move forward in this digital world and get kids up and online.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Okay, next question will begin with Ms. Pohanky. In the area of curriculum in schools, do you feel it is up to the legislature to set curriculum policy, or up to the State Board of Education and the local, you know, Board of Educations, specifically when it comes to teaching the critical race theory and other cultural inclusive history?
Well, let's get one. Am I first? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you
Get
are.
one thing clear. Critical race theory is a largely manufactured scandal that has been bandied about in this election year to try and stoke fear for political gain. It is not taught in any school that I've been to. It's a college level thing. And, you know, we have the Common Core state standards. People don't talk about that enough. Teachers know about the Common Core state standards because they live and breathe them every day. That is the curriculum standard in each content area by which the teachers design their lessons. So, you know, the Common Core, Michigan has adopted theirs from the federal standards, and they're set. And as long as teachers are teaching to the standards and can reach their kids with engaging lessons and creative ways to help them internalize what the standards are, then we can see we can see learning and academic achievement increase.
Okay. Then Mrs. Bowman.
Can
Same.
you, I love listening to the answers, but I need to hear the question again.
I know. In regards to like curriculum in schools, do you feel it should be dealt with at the legislative level, at the State Board of Education, or at the local school board level, especially when it comes to the subject matter of critical race theory, culturally inclusive history, and other areas that might become sensitive?
So in general, I am a proponent of as much going to the local schools as possible because they know their students, they know their communities, they know what's there. The local school working with the parents that are there. What our MCL says that parents are the ones to direct the care, education and care of their children. And they need to be working together with the local schools to be able to help them do that. I kind of mentioned this before, a mediocre school education is just not acceptable to me. It wasn't acceptable to me growing up. My parents were both teachers. They weren't going to settle for mediocrity in their children. And I'm not doing that with my own. And I know that one of the things we need to be looking at is high school diplomas. We're not even at a standard that we need to be at with high school diplomas. And I'd like to see a system that raises that and focuses on the core academics of math, science, reading, the liberal arts, music, physical education, as I mentioned before. We need to increase that. Those areas that actually improve the physical and mental health of our students, because this is generations. It's not for something now. This is for the leaders of our tomorrow, being able to, so they know, how to be elected officials themselves, understanding the government, how it works, understanding the Declaration of Independence, understanding the Constitution, understanding why things were done the way they were, and being able to figure out ways to, whether it be improve it, but we can't spend time on other things that actually lower the standards.
Okay, thank you. The next one, we'll begin with Ms. Bauman again, or Mrs. Bauman, I'm sorry. Do you think the state income tax should change from a flat rate to a graduated rate? Why or not? Why or why not?
The state income tax. I am generally a proponent of a flat rate because then it's more even with whatever income you have. A flat rate means that you pay your share. That's really what people are asking for. They're asking, saying just pay the share. They don't, if you make more money, you're going to pay more because that rate is just going to work for that. So the persistent, percentage. So I would definitely say I'm a proponent of a flat rate income tax. I actually think it needs to be flat regardless. I don't think it should go with income. I think it should just, I know I've just been reading that there are some states that are going to that already. It's really exciting. Obviously, there's some states that don't have income tax at all. And that's a whole nother conversation that I would love to have with people that, when we're talking about putting more money in people's pockets to be able to pay for their food and their fuel and vacations even, what do we need to be looking at that? So, yes.
Okay. And then Ms. Polanki, the same question.
This hasn't been discussed in my legislative term in any serious way. But I've looked into the graduated income tax. It's considered super progressive, but that's okay. I think it's something we should definitely think about. To have a more equitable way to tax our residents. So it's something that I would consider. If it comes to fruition, that this is something that Michiganders want to see happen.
Okay, thank you. And the next question will begin with Ms. Polanki. Food insecurity continues to be a major problem throughout the state. Children are the most affected, especially when schools are not open. What suggestions do you have to correct this situation?
Well, I'm trying to think of things that can be done at the state level. I know there are lots of federal programs. I know that schools saw and families saw relief in the form of free lunch during the pandemic. And while our free and reduced lunch program is good, I don't know that everyone knows that if they're eligible or not for that. So I definitely think that expanding the free lunch and breakfast for kids in schools would help alleviate food insecurity. You know, I'm going to shopping at Larry's, and it's really, it hurts, you know. My husband and I are doing okay. We can afford, you know, food, but the prices are really high right now. And I feel for people, and I just want to continue to push ways for our residents to work and have good paying jobs so that they can afford to eat. Definitely in areas, I'm trying to represent an area in Inkster where there is no grocery store, and that's not right to me at all. So access to food, access to transportation to get food, increasing wages and good paying careers, not just, you know, necessarily gigs and having 4 different jobs to try and make ends meet. So these are some of the things that are coming to my mind.
Okay, thank you. And the same question for you, Mrs. Bowman.
I actually was aware also that over the pandemic, there was an increase in opportunities for a lot of students to access food, because food insecurity is definitely, we can't, you know, our country, it's amazing that there's actually people that are going hungry in our country. It's amazing to me when you think about that with the most of us are, you know, make more, even some of our impoverished make more than some people in even other countries. It just doesn't make sense to me that there'd be people that would be going hungry in our country with all the food that we have and the waste. So I know that being really encouraging places to provide food, if they have extra food, whether it be the restaurants or the grocery stores, making sure that there's always good opportunities for them to provide food. And one of the things I guess I want to touch on too is when I think about food insecurity is even the health of it. We need to really be changing the food options that our schools have. I know that those menus that these kids have there's a lot of schools that they're not giving them fruits and vegetables. They're getting processed foods and all that. And it's like, no, we need to be changing what food we are making available to the people that are needing food. Because if they don't have healthy food, then insecurity is only one part of it. You know, you can't fill that with food that doesn't make someone healthy and doesn't help their minds develop and grow. So we need to make sure that we are looking at providing full healthy choices. And I hear people say, oh, my child won't eat it. I'm like, well, we need to make sure that we are providing, you know, I was told once when I was starting my first kids, put cheese on anything and the kids will eat it. But you really got to look at the quality of food that we're actually giving to our schools, and that the school programs, the free and reduced lunches too.
Okay, thank you. The next question, we'll start with Mrs. Bowman. Would you support a constitutional amendment to make abortion legal in the state of Michigan? Why or why not?
Yeah. So Article 1, Section 8 of the US Constitution lays out the proper role of the federal governments, including the Supreme Court. So I will say that with the decision going back to the states, it was a correct decision to put it back to the states. That is a critical part. And now Michigan actually does have the opportunity to make a law for our state if they don't change it. The key here is that we are making sure that we are knowing what we are actually doing. We need to make sure that if we are going to be putting new laws in or changing laws, that we're not making any situation worse than it already is. And I really encourage people, I know this is an emotional topic. I know I've had conversations with people and we just sit down and we discuss. And I want to ask questions. I want to learn. There's a lot of situations. It goes back to individuals. And we need to have the discussion, because right now I'm really encouraging people to read what the law says, understand it, talk to attorneys and find out what is really it's doing, as well as the new proposal. They need to be looking at that and finding out what is that really, what are we really saying yes to, or what are we saying no to on that? If we don't understand the words, because this is a constitutional amendment, this is not to be taken lightly. And that came through really fast, in less than a year. And to make a change to the Constitution that quickly, I work for nonprofits and we don't put bylaws that fast. And there's nothing like the Constitution of Michigan. We really need to be looking at that, at the words on that, because that does, we just need to make sure that we're not trying to fix something that we think is broken and actually make it worse.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Polhanky, the same question.
I appreciate that Ms. Bauman values individual liberty, and so do I. I believe that women can and should have the ability to exercise their right to liberty and equality by having autonomy over their own bodies. And I can tell you what the 1931 law that is on the books does. It would make abortion a felony and punishable by putting providers, and it's unclear with people who aid providers, and for a woman having an abortion, it would make it a felony, punishable by up to 4 years in prison. In 1931, there were no women in the Michigan legislature when this was passed, and it's time for that to go. I have co-sponsored the repeal of this archaic 1931 law in the Michigan Senate. Unfortunately, it hasn't been brought to a vote by the majority party.
Okay, thank you. The next question will begin with Ms. Polhanky. What measures do you support to improve voter participation in our state?
Yeah, we definitely need to make voting easier. I would support a holiday where everyone takes the day off work to vote. Some things that could be a federal thing, but some nitty-gritty things that I think we can do is provide prepaid postage on absentee ballot applications and absentee ballots to make it easier. The drop boxes are a dream for ease, and just drive on through and there you go, you voted. So requiring drop boxes in every municipality, dramatically increasing people's ability to vote early and in person by, I'd like to see 9 days. Continue the safe and effective process of requiring voters to prove their identity by showing a voter ID or signing an affidavit at the polls, and then providing their signature when voting by mail. Allow the local clerks to start processing ballots earlier to speed up the tabulating process so that, the clerks can deliver election results to Michiganders in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you. And then Mrs. Bauman, the same question.
I think the question is how to increase people voting. I've actually been working with a lot of groups right now that are going out door to door, talking to people about, the election, about, different things going on, and whether or not they're voting and whether or not they're registered, finding out these information so that they can say, and learn why. If someone's not voting, why aren't you voting? Having those conversations, engaging with the people who are actually the ones that, that are able to vote, and find out, what's going on, why are you voting? And even encourage them and say that, the best way to know what's going on, the best way to prevent any concern you have with the election system is to vote, and vote in your own name. It's the #1 best way. If we want to have accurate votes, we need to have them. We actually need to have the ballots from the people that are voting. So obviously I support voter ID, because I think it's critical that we make sure that the people that are registered legally are the ones that are voting. And that is a critical part. I think that that's kind of given. I've looked back in years and years and years, and that's been a common conversation. It's not new, just the last few years. It's been something that has been a conversation for years, as far as making sure that the elections are truly just are within our own country, and that we actually are, and even in our own state, that the state is managing the state. I do get concerned. I will admit, I do get concerned with a 9-day voting, because I know there's some smaller areas that actually can't handle something like that. So I do get some concerns with that. I do support an election day, and I would actually support, yes, a holiday on election day. I would have to say that too. But because that would encourage people to maybe even a paid, like I said, paid day and stuff like that, so encourage them to vote, and really knowing why people aren't voting is critical.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, next question. And that will start with Mrs. Bowman. Please explain why you do or do not think it is important to reduce the role of money in American elections. Like, they say dark money, and the Constitution, the Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah.
Where, you don't have to, you have PACs that don't have to let people know who's giving the money.
So elections are a matter of state and national security. I'm going to take myself back to when I was younger, watching news and hearing about elections in other countries and how they weren't free, they weren't fair. I remember sitting and hearing my parents and watching the news, and I can't really, I remember that I remember that watching it and saying that country does not have free and fair elections. The person that they knew was going to get through office is the person that got elected. And so we have to be aware that this is a matter of state and national security. This is not to be taken lightly. Our forefathers had this conversation over and over again on what it would take to make sure that we actually had an election system that was the voice of the people and no one else. And yes, if we're putting money in from other areas, that is, we should not be accepting any money from other states or any private organizations. We need to make sure that we are actually handling that in a very, very safe, secure way. And that is critical.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Polanki, the same question.
Yeah, this is my second election, and I would love to reduce the role that of money in American elections. Boy, the amount of money it takes just to get one mailer out there is daunting. At the federal level, obviously, there are things that can be done. I'm talking about viewing corporations as people, but reducing the role of money in American elections is something that I would support. And I'm trying to think of what could be done at the state level. Again, this isn't something that has been talked about much in my legislative term, but there's PACs and super PACs and individual donations and all sorts of things that it's hard to understand where the money is coming from a lot of times and how it's flowing. I don't even fully understand it. So definitely some transparency there, some sunshine on how that all works, I think would be helpful for Michiganders to understand. I also agree with the ballot initiative that requires financial disclosure for legislators. So, if you're pulling in money from wherever, are you also voting on that thing that might benefit you and make money for yourself, which wouldn't be good. So I do support increased transparency in elections and for legislators.
Okay, thank you. Next question, we'll begin with Ms. Polanki. Would you support Michigan entering into the National Popular Vote Compact to elect the president? Why or why not?
I don't know if that's a question that's within my purview as a state legislator. Isn't that more of a federal thing? I mean, I believe, you know, you can, we should have one vote for every person, and actually the popular vote should be the determining factor. But when you're talking about changing electoral college laws, and I'm not sure that there's much we can do here at the state level, but you know, knee-jerk reaction is, yeah, the popular vote should win the day. Maybe it's the electoral college is a little outdated at this point.
Okay, thank you. And then Mrs. Baumann, the same question.
I appreciate that this is probably a more federal than state level, but I do know some states have talked about pulling themselves out of that and things like that. But one of the things, I am in support of the electoral college, because as I've looked at the population of the United States, a lot of the population, more than half of the population, is sitting and residing in urban areas, which would mean that if we went to a popular vote, then those rural areas, which is, you know, which is almost half, but not quite half of the population, people are gravitating more to urban areas because for amenities or facilities and things like that, that's just what they're doing, that we would lose. We have the potential to lose that voice. And if we want everyone to have a voice, we need to make sure that we are including them in the calculations for, you know, their ballot. So the Electoral College was designed to be sure that there was an evening out, regardless of where people lived, in what state or even what part of the state.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then next question, we begin with Mrs. Bowman. What is your position on the Voters for Transparency and Term Limits ballot proposal that's going to be on the November ballot?
Yeah, I'm actually not in favor of that particular solution. I 100% want to see transparency with a lot of things that are going on in our legislature and our government and things like that. But the reasons why I am actually not in support of that is one of the, again, it goes back to sometimes the solution we provide is not actually what we need to fix the problem. And I'm going to be honest, I have not spent a lot of time with understanding exactly what the problem is that they're looking at to be able to say, is this the right solution? But I am very concerned with this particular solution. And I actually have one of the things I've provided input on is that when, you know, years ago, when CEOs, when there was a concern with the CEO salaries and, you know, for private organizations about how much they're making because they didn't have to disclose it, they decided that a law passed that all CEOs of private corporations had to disclose their salaries because they thought that would help. They thought that it would reduce but if people knew what the salaries were, they would reduce the gap between the low and the high in a private organization. That, I mean, I think that there was unfairness and things. Well, it didn't. It actually made it worse. What happened was Joe started seeing what Sam was making and Susie, and they started competing, and it actually it became more transparent, but it didn't fix the problem. In fact, it made it worse. The gap between the high salary in an organization is huge, much larger. And so it didn't actually fix the problem. So my concern with this particular amendment, or actually, well, again, constitutional amendment, and back to what I said before, we should not be changing our constitution too quickly or too easily because that's a really big deal. So even just in that part of it, we need to be really careful about that. And then, is this really the right solution for the problem that seems to be existing?
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Polhanke, the same question.
I understand the reasoning for limiting terms. I get it. But you know, on the other hand, you say term limits are the voice of the voters. So if someone's been in office too long, then let the people vote them out. So I understand why term limits were put in place in the Michigan House. It's 3 2-year terms. In the Michigan Senate, it's 2 4-year terms. And what this proposal would do would ultimately decrease the amount of time from 14 years to 12 years, but in either chamber. And I do support it because, you know, especially in the House, you know, I don't envy them because, you know, they're trying to serve their constituents for a year, and after a year, they have to start campaigning again. The terms are so short. And you also have the problem of really inexperienced people, maybe with a year and a half in the legislature becoming Speaker of the House, and sometimes that can cause problems. So I do support the term limits and transparency initiative. I especially support, like I said before, the transparency initiative, so that I'm happy to disclose, what my family makes and where it comes from, so that, the people know when I'm voting on things that, I'm voting for the right reasons.
Okay, thank you. All right. Unfortunately, depends on how you want to look at it. It's at 8 o'clock, so it's time for us to start with our closing statements. And Mrs. Baumann, you will go first with this, and you get 2 minutes.
Thank you. Patrick Henry said, "Guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel." We need people in Lansing who are willing to guard that public liberty at every step, understanding that there are the few powers of the federal government and all others are given to the states. The bottom line is this: the people of my district and around Michigan want to be able to gain the skills to work, make a fair wage, put food on the table and fuel in their cars, and take a few vacations for relaxing and resting and getting, mental health. I will champion getting government out of the way so businesses can flourish and families can have more money in their wallets. We cannot settle for mediocrity in our education, and I will work to keep money and decisions at the local school level, allowing for parents and schools to raise the bar in excellence in academics. I will work to be sure that parental rights are preserved. I will listen to all the people in my district and state to understand where you are at. I want to meet you where you are at so we can work together and develop good common sense solutions that work and solutions that support and uphold individual liberty. Two of the most humbling statements my friends have said when describing me are that they trust me, I do what I say I will do. They can always count on me no matter what. And the second is that I listen. I really listen, and I ask questions to understand them, and then I give them a fair, pragmatic response with a perspective that they might not have heard before. Unlike their other friends who say just what they want to hear, I say what they need to hear, and I speak truth, and good things come from it every time. I'm Emily Baumann, running for your next state senator from the newly drawn 5th District, Canton, Westland, Garden City, Inkster, and Southwest Livonia. And thank you again to the League of Women Voters for having me and giving me this opportunity.
You're welcome. Ms. Pohanke, your closing statement.
Yeah, gosh, 4 years, I just feel like I'm just starting to get good at this. So I think there's still a lot of work left to do. And, depending on the dynamic of the legislature after the November 8th election, I would like to see bills moved and funding appropriated in ways that hasn't been done for a long time in the Michigan Senate, 38 years. So I'm just going to kind of recap and hammer home what I'd like to see happen and what my priorities are. Education, we need to invest in K-12 education in a way that is equitable and incentivizes young people to become teachers and current teachers to stay in the profession. Seniors, repeal that retirement tax, it's unfair. Labor, we need to repeal right to work laws that hinder union membership, so that Michiganders can have worker protections and wages that allow them to live dignified, good lives. Roads and infrastructure, we need to invest in them, including our water infrastructure to make up for years of neglect. Environment, we need to hold corporate polluters accountable like we did with the landfill operators in my district that had way too many violations and that we checked. Abortion, we need to repeal the 1931 law that makes abortion a felony, so that women can continue to exercise their right to liberty and freedom and bodily autonomy. And I hope anyone who's listening today will come on board and be my partner in progress once again.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We thank the League of Women Voters members who helped with this forum, Ann Abdu and Val Nelson, and myself, Susan Rowe, as the moderator. The forum has been recorded and can soon be viewed on the league's website, lwvnorthwestwayne.org. We also thank the candidates, Emily Bauman and Dana Polhanke, for their participation. They are asking for your support as they seek a job in the public service sector, and we hope voters will listen to their views. We also appreciate the voters in Michigan's 5th Senatorial District who are watching this forum to learn about their choices for the general election in November the 8th. All of these candidates were also invited to participate in the League of Women Voters Voter Guide, a publication that you can access online by visiting vote411.org. I am happy to state that both candidates responded to our request. The League is providing this forum as an opportunity for candidates to express their views related to their candidacy. Statements expressed by the candidates are not endorsed nor opposed by the League. Also, the League does not certify any candidate's responses to questions as accurate. Voters are encouraged to fact-check information shared at the forum. Election Day is November the 8th. If you are not registered to vote, you can do so up through Election Day. Within 14 days of the election, registrations must be done, however, at the office of your city clerk. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., but all registered voters can vote early by absentee ballot. Remember that you first must fill out and return an absentee ballot application to your city or township clerk before a ballot can be mailed to you. If you need an absentee ballot application, contact your city clerk. This concludes our forum this evening. Thank you, candidates, for participating. And just remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. You have to get out there and get involved. And thank you to both of you again. Really appreciate your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.